Start the slideshow, and here we go. So this is a slideshow about our somesthetic senses, the senses of the skin and body. The skin senses are varied. It can be touch, pressure, temperature, and pain. And note that I'm saying skin, but I'm really talking about things that can be external or internal. The external senses are called exteroreceptive, and the internal are called interoreceptive. There's another term you need to know that isn't in the book, proprioception. Proprioception means you're receiving information about your own body. So if you have, say, pain receptors internally, like around your organs or your digestive system, those would be interoreceptors, and they would be proprioceptive. Another proprioceptive sense would be your body senses, the kinesthetic and vestibular sense, that kind of tell you where your body is. Before I get into skin senses, just note that touch is really important to humans and will be important in two later units, development and disorders. Tactile stimulation of preterm infants has been shown to have a significant effect on improves their weight gain, which is important for their survival and well-being, and it also has been shown when it's lacking that it can result in attachment disorders, and there were studies of orphanages in Romania with that. More directly for the development unit, there's a very famous set of experiments by a man named Harry Harlow in the 50s who studied the importance of contact comfort with monkeys, and that the background picture shows an image from his studies. We'll talk about that more in the development unit. So let's look at the skin. There are a variety of different stimuli that can be detected by the skin, and we have a variety of different receptors for that purpose. We have hair cells, we have hairs, we have corpuscles, and we have free nerve endings. The hairs are sensitive to touch. The corpuscular cells are like these here or these here that kind of have a glob at the end, and they are sensitive to different kinds of touch. Pinpoint touch, touching a whole kind of broad region, surface pressure, deeper pressure, movement, and vibration. The free nerve endings shown here and actually wrapped around the hair follicle can detect pain, temperature, and when a hair follicle is bent. This is another diagram of the skin, epidermis, dermis, hypodermis. You do not need to know the specific names of different receptors like Merkel's disc or Meissner's corpuscle or the Pacinian corpuscle. You just should recognize, like I already said, that there are these varieties that exist. In terms of what gets coded in skin sensations, we code information for the weight of what we're sensing, the vibration, the location, and the pressure. We code information about temperature. We code information about pain, including the location, the type of pain, and the degree of pain. Pathways are complex, and don't get too hung up on it. I'm going to give you probably more information than you need. And just in general, this whole lecture is pretty detailed for those of you that want it, but the degree of questions probably won't be as detailed as this presentation. We have different types of neurons for various sensations. They vary in size and whether they're large or small, and how much myelin or whether they have any myelin on them. And you should, of course, remember that myelination increases the speed of transmission. Sharp pressure and pain and cool and cold information travel more quickly, either because the fibers are larger or because they're myelinated, or both. Dull pain and warm and hot travel a little more slowly. You don't have to memorize all this stuff on here. Just a couple of things I'll point out. Noxious stimulus is anything that is harmful to the body, so that can be a tack pricking us, or too much heat or something like that burning us. We have nociceptors, though that is a pain receptor. And the reason I am showing you this is just to remind you of that there are multiple pathways up, and when you get to the brain, the important organs or structures are the thalamus, always, for relay station. There's a crossover in the hindbrain at the medulla oblongata down here, and the somatosensory cortex is up in the parietal lobe. It's just that strip at the top. And then, of course, the limbic system, the hippocampus and the amygdala and the hypothalamus are significant. The key brain structures in the pathway are the ones I just went over. For the sensation of touch, all our sensations are contralateral, so it crosses over at the medulla in the hindbrain. The thalamus decides what gets sent on and what doesn't, and then the somatosensory cortex is where we become consciously aware of the sensation of touch. Let me make sure I've got everything. I want to go back for a second. I left something out, and I just think it's worth going over. When you think about getting touched, imagine you were blindfolded and you were touched by 3 different objects that each were 1 inch square. A cube of absorbent cotton, a stiff metal brush, and a polished metal cube. Based on what I've told you, do you think you'd be able to tell the difference? And the answer should be that you get yes, certainly, because we've evolved to detect not just the application of pressure, but to sense the features of what is touching us. And obviously that's useful to tell that it's cotton touching you, not a stiff metal brush. And everything I just went through in terms of the types of receptors and the variety of information that we can code helps us tell the difference. Okay, back to where we were. Temperature and pain. There are 2 kinds of nerve fibers that sense temperature. We have different nerves that sense cold and warm. They are both highly responsive to changes in temperature, not so much just absolute temperature. And if you remember from the beginning of the unit, when a receptor becomes less responsive due to an unchanging stimulus, what we call that, and that is particularly true for temperature. Pain is complicated. We need to be responsive to a wide range of noxious or unpleasant stimuli, and so we have this kind of range of sensory and emotional experiences related to some form of tissue damage, whether it's actual or potential. Pain is obviously critical for survival. We need to be able to remove ourselves from dangerous situations or to seek a quick remedy for our injuries. And so we're very sensitive to it, but we also have ways to reduce our sensitivity to it. And we have multiple redundant pathways, so more than one way to get that information to the brain. So we can experience, the book talks about both somatic pain and visceral pain. Somatic pain is pain sensations in the skin, the muscles, the tendons, or the joints. Visceral pain is pain on the organs, and we have receptors in all of those areas. Let's talk about somatic pain. The book, I like this section in the book. It talks about hitting your thumb with a hammer. You will get a sharp, quick pain that goes quickly to the brain on myelinated fibers that are large, and then you will get that dull ache that is less precise in its location, kind of as a reminder of the pain. Visceral pain I talked about is proprioceptive, stomach ache, earache, injured joints or bones. These kind of alert us to something's wrong inside. Should talk about the experience of pain. What is the psychological experience? It's very subjective. It's affected by much more than just what we take in physiologically. It can be affected by our personal expectations, by our adaptation levels, so maybe we don't notice pain as much if we are adjusted for it, or if we've had chronic pain, we might be more sensitive to pain. Cultural influences actually affect our perception of pain. The practices or beliefs or needs of one culture may raise or lower the pain threshold of the society as a whole. For example, in terms of ear piercing, Asians are reported to experience more pain than Caucasians. Substance P. Substance P is an actual thing. It is a type of neurotransmitter and neuroregulator that gets released into the spinal cord through the neurons. The pathway for pain is the same or similar to other skin sensations. It goes through the thalamus, the somatosensory cortex, and the limbic system. How we experience pain. There's a theory that is a little complicated, the gate control theory. And note that the gate is not a physical structure. It's just kind of the balance of neural signals we're getting from three places. One are the pain signals from our pain fibers. The second would be non-pain signals, like when you rub the area around a sore spot. It's kind of a distractory, and that can decrease your sensation of pain. And then you also get a feedback loop from the brain that can enhance, make you more sensitive to the pain signal so that it opens the gate, or dampen it, close the gate. And sometimes what gets dampened actually are those large fibers with the fast pain, but the sore throbbing pain, the kind of duller pain continues as a reminder. And then of course endorphins can inhibit the transmission of pain signals in the brain. And can inhibit the release of substance P in the spinal cord. That's a lot of information. Take a second to do what you need with that. We'll wrap up with the body senses. I just have a few slides on this. Our body senses are kinesthetic, skeletal movement and positioning, and that kind of tells us where the various parts of the body are in relation to one another and how the body parts are moving, if at all. It's also our vestibular sense, balance and equilibrium. So the kinesthetic sense. We have receptors all over the body, in the muscles, the tendons, the joints, and the skin. The stimulus is mechanical energy, so the pressure if they get moved. And the receptor cells are just called kinesthetic receptor cells. They detect changes in position or pressure and transduce that to a nerve impulse. What's coded is the speed of the change, the angle of the bones, and any kind of change in muscle tension. The pathway is it goes up the spinal cord, and as with all this other stuff, is shifted to the other side of the body, or the other side of the brain. It's contralateral. And in the brain, it goes to both the somatosensory cortex, as you would expect, and if you remember, also the cerebellum, because that cerebellum controls motor coordination. In terms of the vestibular sense, that's our balance and equilibrium. That is determined by the orientation of the head in relation to gravity, as well as the movement and acceleration of our bodies through space. We tend to be unaware of our vestibular sense unless it's overstimulated, like in a roller coaster ride. So that's just the text of what I just explained. And the result for that would be dizziness or nausea. That's the experience of the vestibular sense. Video games or virtual reality systems can result in a form of motion sickness known as cyber sickness. The stimulus is again mechanical, and it's similar to kind of hearing, and the receptors are actually hair cells in our inner ear. So I'm going to go back a slide. So you remember the outer ear, the middle ear with the three little bones, and then the inner ear is this whole structure with the cochlea for hearing, and then the vestibular sacs, that's the utricle and or urticle and the saccule, and then the three canals that kind of give the three dimension of our movement through space. The vestibular sacs and the semicircular canals detect movement in different directions, and that gets translated as movement of the fluid in those canals and sacs that will stimulate the hair cells. And the pathway for the vestibular sense goes through the auditory nerve, just like hearing, and to both, again, the cerebellum and the cortex. What gets coded? The rate of acceleration, the direction of our movement, and our relative orientation in space. Motion sickness occurs when the brain has to integrate incompatible information from, say, our vision and our vestibular sense. But in addition, we can, the vestibular sense can be kind of soothing when we have a little kind of rocking and things like that. So that is the end of that lecture. Not too bad, 16 minutes. See you later.